So I will let Kathy introduce herself, though she always does a bad job at it because she very much, you do, she very much understates everything she's done, but she's really been kind of a pioneer in the world of interactive media, has a PhD from Harvard University in kind of interactive media and developmental psychology. She has a ton of other degrees as well that I can't even remember if I don't look it up. And she has worked. She was one of the first people to kind of try to figure out how you use interactive media in an educational way, in an entertaining way, in general. Like back in the 80s, creating very, first on like CD-ROMs and then moving over to kind of internet, moving over from there to social media. And now she's a professor at NYU's TISCH School of the Arts, specifically in interactive media. So welcome, Kathy.
Everything Nina said. It's interesting to hear all your backgrounds because it's very similar, your range, which is so broad, to this program I work in at NYU called ITP, which is the Interactive Telecommunications Program. And it's interesting that it's a program in the School of the Arts because it's very much based on sort of tech issues, but how they apply very broadly across the arts. And we have majors from everywhere: biology, psychology, law, tech, film, video, photography, all coming together to try to think through where we're headed in this world, which is now such a convergence of so many different things. So you alone right here are kind of a group very similar to the groups that I'm usually working with at NYU, which is really interesting. And I think it's back to my own background. I think it's why I like it so much, because I'm very all over the place too. I was an art major as an undergrad. I was really into film and photography. I loved working with children, particularly children who had learning differences. And way back in the day, meaning like a million years ago in the 80s, the technology we have now was not around, but it became obvious to me when I started to see it appearing that these kids, there was a lot of opportunity to work with different kinds of learners using interactive, more media-based approaches. So it's interesting how that interest led me through all of these jobs and all of these, at one point I had 1,000,000 miles on United Airlines from all the jobs I was flying to. And I never would have thought, starting as a little art major at a liberal arts school with an interest in kids with learning issues. So I'm happy that you're coming from such a range of different backgrounds. I think that's what sort of drives you in your career is your basic interest. I guess that's where I would start.
And I think that's been a kind of overriding theme I've tried to get across throughout the internship is everybody's very worried about, are they making the right decisions in terms of their major? Are they making the right choices? And I was just kind of saying, like, I've always been all over the place and I still am, but that ability has given me that personality has given me the ability to kind of see like the bigger picture and see things that other people don't, and then you start to piece it all together. So it's cool that it's kind of the same thing you're saying right now.
Yeah. And I used to encounter people who, I'd ask, well, what are you interested in? And they'd say making money or something. And yeah, that's true. We all
have to pay our bills. That's a given.
That's true. But they were so floundering in their jobs because they hadn't found a focus, something to drive them forward and continually put themselves out there and try new things. And I think that's really what you need, something like that. It's nice to make money, but
it's necessary. I mean, it's necessary, yeah. But
to have that as the only goal in life is very tough. So it sounds like you're all on a good track.
What is ITP predominantly like masters?
ITP, the program started as a two-year master's program, taking people from all over the world, all kinds of backgrounds, and bringing them together to kind of experiment in this new area that sort of was art meets technology. a couple of years ago, an undergrad program was started called the IMA program. And now there are also low residency programs, which means basically that you're not there full time. You can do things for most of the time. You can have a job and do other things, but you can also go to school at the same time through this program and earn a degree that way as well. So it's really broadened to include undergrad and grad. I've mostly worked with the master's students who the youngest are about 24 and the oldest was maybe 75.
Oh, wow. So it's not too late.
It's never too late. I mean, there are a lot of lifelong learners out there, and we've had a lot of people, or I should say not a lot, a number of people who had a great career somewhere. I mean, at one point, one of my students was a vice president at Turner Media in Atlanta, and he would fly up once a week for classes, and he just really wanted to change his focus from straight sort of cable TV to more interactive and digital pursuits. So he came to the program. So it's always out there. Something's always out there if you want to learn something new.
What is one of the like your favorite projects that you've ever worked on? I know, like, I don't know how you can even remember them all, let alone sort through them, but if you had to pick one to talk about.
Let's see. I mean, I always talk about this one, but way back in the 80s, I was asked to get involved in a project, probably because a lot of people, no one else would. I mean, it was very early on and no one knew what they were doing. And it involved trying to figure out what it would mean to have an interactive component to a television show. So a TV show was being produced for PBS. It was for kids. It was supposed to be a fun learning approach that involved kids going out on a boat, with a bunch of oceanographers and other scientists to study whales. And that was the first season. The second season was going on a boat down to Mexico and studying the ancient Maya ruins. And I was asked to come in and figure out how to put something related to that on a computer. So we had a hodgepodge group of people. I was the designer producer. We had a big funder who was RCA Labs in New Jersey. They were creating a new chip that was going to allow computers to actually manage and manipulate film, video, sound, graphics, animation, which in that time
It was revolutionary at the time.
Not possible.
Yes.
So nobody knew what that meant. I mean, it was just kind of, here's our chips, you figure out what to do.
Yes, yes.
And so it involves so much craziness and experimentation and failure, but picking ourselves up and trying again. We actually went down to Mexico and filmed a Maya site, and we recreated something like Street View now. You know how you can drive around the streets and sort of see things before going there. Well, that was not available then, but we actually did something like that, walking around a Maya ruin, and made kids, gave kids the ability to walk around the Maya ruin with our little system. And so I think I liked it because it involved a great team of pioneering types with a spirit that they wanted to try anything. It involved a big tech partner and a big sort of broadcast TV partner, and then us. And so I think that was the most interesting project.
That's amazing. And so, like, but you've always kind of and I guess that's your sweet spot, is kind of finding like the new tech. What do you do with the new tech, right?
Yeah.
How do we, and I think a lot of times like people just wantonly apply new tech just to say, oh, we use new tech, but to actively like get down into the nitty gritty of it and figure out how it can be beneficial, like how it can help people learn, how it can help people do daily tasks. Like that's where I think you've kind of led the charge.
Yeah. And I've accepted the offer to try to work with it too. I mean, I think you have to have a kind of mindset. I like not knowing what I'm doing, I guess.
Yes, same.
It's funny because I've been to school many times, but I always go to school after I've done something. So when I went back to school to get the doctorate, I had spent some years working with kids with learning differences, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had been an art major in college, and right. that was the job I found. So I went back to school after I did that to kind of put it all together in my mind, how kids learn, how kids think. and how we might use media to help facilitate all of that. I went and got an MBA after I'd been in corporate America for 20 years. You'd think you'd do that first, but I went later. And then I was able to get a lot of consulting projects after that, just because I had that degree. But I actually knew everything. It just was all put together through the MBA program.
Yes. I think it's more other people realize your talent once you have that degree versus having developed that talent through the degree.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I think some people it works the other way around, but I'm always the kind of person where I have to do something myself with my hands and make it, and then I'll go research it and learn about it, but I have to work it out myself first.
So is there something now that's kind of the new technology that you're trying to figure out how to do something with?
I think it's more I'm much more interested in nature now. You see my background?
So you're going complete opposite direction.
I'm at one point in my life, I worked at Atari, which was a game company. I don't know if it's still around, a video game company.
Do you guys know what Atari was? Are you familiar?
And I was helping design Roadrunner games. You know what Roadrunner is?
I do, but I don't know if they do.
It's a cartoon.
Yes. So you have, show of hands, who's heard of Atari? Oh, cool.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's most.
So they were trying to move from coin-operated games in arcades to games on home devices. And so again, I got hired onto this team to work on a Roadrunner game. And part of what I did is I interviewed all the deeply technical people, and in those days they were extremely technical. They were all working on, $100,000 computers, which could compute all kinds of data very fast, and they were way out there. And so many of them said, I'd asked them about things they enjoyed in life or whatever, and they said they really enjoy nature, and they feel very relaxed, and their minds are able to settle down. This was in California too, so I should say getting into nature was very easy. And it just really struck me that they would talk about that. And I realize now, after living a very busy life, there's something about it. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if technology can help bring whatever nature gives us, but I'm sort of looking into this area. I've thought a lot about synthetic biology and some of these kinds of things. But anyway, that's kind of another off tangent that may never amount to anything.
No, it's fascinating though, and yes, I think, and the fact that the people so heavily involved in tech would then be so heavily soothed by nature, speaks, there's something in that connection, right? Like there has to be something there.
Yeah, these kinds of computer scientists who maybe some of you are, they're very precise in their thinking. And they would also comment on how they would come across things that they couldn't figure out, and it really drove them nuts. Their brains would almost misfire. And this is when they would want to go out and, I don't know, somehow be in another environment and let their minds float, and then they'd come back and have other solutions to the problem. And this kind of forest bathing, some people refer to it as, this kind of rewilding, it's starting to come up more now, I see in the popular press.
Yes.
So I just find that interesting.
I think definitely during COVID lockdown, like everybody, I read a lot of articles about forest bathing and hiking as like ways to not get sick while you were trying to do something during COVID, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
So
not be around too many people.
Yeah, ideally. Although whenever we went for walks in the park, it was like so
crowded. I know.
We were like, oh, you can't even get away in the park here. But yeah, ideally.
Yeah.
Oh God, I had a question and now it's left my brain. Bah. Oh, I just wanted to kind of make the point to the students that, like, too, when we started with, so Kathy started interactive television group within Viacom, and then it literally, like, all the ideas that they came up with, the broadband wasn't there to support the ideas, right? So we were kind of a research and design team that would try to think of all these ideas, ways to use television and film in more interactive methods. And then a lot of times the prototype we created was just not like physically sustainable by the existing broadband infrastructure of the time. So it's interesting now, I think, to see like things come to fruition that we were working on, 20, 25 years ago that we just couldn't implement because the infrastructure didn't support it at the time.
Yeah. And 10 years, no, it was more 10 years ago or so, I started a film collective for independent filmmakers, and the whole focus of it was to help them get their films online. I mean, nowadays that sounds like a joke, but in those days they couldn't see it. They didn't understand. I mean, the technology wasn't quite up to snuff yet. It was very difficult to, get your film up there easily. They felt uncomfortable even thinking about it. And so we shut down this collective in 2019 because the world
Just
had
before
caught up to
everybody
it.
did it, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it was happening. So it's that kind of thing where you sort of see, wait a sec, why aren't they doing this? We at Viacom, actually, one of our projects was with the Sundance Channel, and we were constantly trying to get them to do an online film festival.
Yep.
As you may know, there's a very big and famous film festival called Sundance, and they had nothing online. They had a TV channel, which actually didn't even broadcast any of the films from the festival. And so they never did it. They would not do it. They would not go there. It was just really interesting. They couldn't understand how they could pull off a film festival online. And now here we are.
And it's interesting because with the festival, the past few years that we've had online festivals, it's always the older filmmakers who are like, I don't want my film online, right? They still are just like freaking out about it. So I just say, fine, like I'm not going to argue with you. It's all good. But
So
yeah,
I think it's just kind of having your, just being very receptive to where you could maybe help, or maybe there's a gap and you can't quite see why. The same thing happened with Blockbuster, where they were selling, this is probably way before you guys were born, but they had, their whole business was
so wait,
renting.
Blockbuster was oh yeah, sorry, I was like, let's explain what Blockbuster was. Does anyone know what Blockbuster was? Yes? Okay.
These video stores where you'd walk in and you could basically rent a video. Then they sort of,
So this was before the internet. You couldn't stream. You couldn't like watch things up. You had a computer, but the computer wasn't connected at all to like anything else. It was just your desktop. And so the TV connected to the cable, but only the cable programming and what they wanted to show you. So VCRs and DVD players, you would basically go to a store. Blockbuster was the biggest one, but there were also like little stores in most communities, and you would rent a video or a DVD, and then you could go home and play it on your device that was connected only to like your television. So, and you would pay for a few days of rental, the late fees, were always an issue, blah, blah, blah.
it was crazy.
And then Netflix came out primarily as a rental business, but they would send the DVDs to your home, and then they offered like a small selection of stuff you could stream online. And then that eventually led to where we are today.
So before Netflix was around, there was Blockbuster and other competitors to Blockbuster, where you go get these videos in stores. When we, I guess, were at Viacom, we convinced Blockbuster to at least get into selling videos online. So we created a big online store for Blockbuster to sell. They shipped basically in the beginning, it was a VHS cassette, but then it was a DVD to your house, but you have bought it. You're not renting it, you own it. Then Netflix came out, and new company, upstart, little guy, and said, well, we're going to ship rental. We're going to ship you rental. So you can rent and send back for a lot less money than buying. And we said to Blockbuster, they're going to eat your lunch. You've got to get into this business.
And they didn't believe it because they were like, they were like Walmart. There was a Blockbuster in every mall strip around the country. There was Blockbusters all over the city. And, they were massive spaces, and they were constantly packed. But
And all of those stores were basically franchisees. And so the corporate powers that be at Blockbuster didn't want to cannibalize their own business. They did not want to alienate their business partners who were all these franchisees. And so they sold themselves down the river by not competing with Netflix. And they're no longer in business. I mean, it's amazing, but it's the death of a dinosaur, really. And they could have been there. They could have done it. So there are just so many things like that, that if you've got your eyes open, you'll see, where you can jump in and try to make a difference. So I kind of kept my head down. I had my own goals, which things I wanted to learn, things I wanted to do. And I would meet them, and then I would move on to something else. So I guess another thing was I had, separate jobs through the past decades, and knew what I wanted to get out of each of them and left. But it was not easy for females. And a lot of this Me Too stuff came out more recently that sort of echoes back to those early days. And what you did in those days, you just motored on. That was how it was handled. And my solution was, okay, when it's so bad I can't stand it anymore, I'm going to move. I'm going to leave this situation. But nowadays there's a lot more recourse, and there's a lot more happening to make it a lot easier for women. And there are women in higher places. I mean, I hardly ever had a female boss or anybody that I could look up to that was a role model for me. So I was motoring. I have my own motor, and a lot of friends outside of work, a lot of very supportive things going on around my work life. So I was able to make it work for me. But that's a really interesting question. And I thought about writing about it, and then I realized I kind of didn't want to relive it. I didn't want to.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's something that you have to have your own inner strength and know why you're in a certain job, and when it's time to leave also, and when you can make a change, when you can have some sort of impact or not. There was one case where it got pretty significantly difficult, and I talked to some people, and the person who had been, being a bad actor ended up being asked to leave the company. And that really surprised me, because that had never happened before. So you never know. I mean, those things could happen, but you don't want to stay in a bad situation. I mean, don't think you have to stay somewhere and, be miserable.